Yes, that's my first rocket launch. How it went? A complete disaster. But despite that, I had a lot of fun building and launching it. I told myself that it was just the beginning and soon my rockets would get much better. Spoiler, they didn't. Next launches were mostly unsuccessful too. But after every launch, I knew much more than before, and one day I felt I want to go a step higher. So instead of preparing motors myself, I bought them, much more powerful than any of my previous sugar motors. With those, I prepared building another rocket that would finally launch safely and straight into skies. The launch was quite successful, the rocket went as I wanted, but it had one significant problem. I couldn't tell how high the rocket went, and I also hadn't recovered it. So, to answer my question, I decided to build next rocket, but this time with a self-made altimeter on board. And this is what the video would be about. Let's begin with the electronics. The circuit is extremely simple. It's just a barometer, micro SD card reader, and an Arduino connected together. I wrote the code, I tested it, and after some small fixes, the circuit is ready to solder. After I finish electronics, it's time to start building the rocket. Or so I thought, but as I tested the electronics, it turned out that there were some major errors. I had to solder everything once again and replace the Arduino because the old Arduino had enough and decided to stop working. Then I learned some things about the BMP280 sensor, and with that new knowledge I changed the code a bit and everything was finally alright. And yes, now it's finally time to start building the rocket. My first thought was to use a PVC tube as a rocket body, because it's really durable and quite simple to use, but then as I weighted it, well, it weighted definitely too much, so I chose a cardboard tube instead, which is durable enough and it's much lighter. The next step was to make the motor mount, so I grabbed aluminum foil which had a really nice tube inside and almost perfectly fitted the motor. I cut it, and then I designed couplet between the rocket body and the motor casing. It looked pretty well, so I glued it inside the rocket body and headed for the next step. I made fins as one part, easier to use, and then designed the nose cone. And also a parachute, which was made from a leather back and some strings. And as I assembled everything together, the rocket looked amazing. and it was almost ready. Except no, it wasn't ready at all, because somehow I totally assumed that, well, electronics are kind of heavy, but that's not really a big problem. As it turned out, it was a problem. Basically, the small charge that has to throw the parachute out of the rocket could be possibly too small to do the same to the electronics. What does it mean? It means that the rocket needs a payload bay. And to make one, first I cut the rocket body, not perfectly straight, I know, but that's not a big deal. Then I designed coupler, and as you can see, the only part left is painting.
Three, two, one, ignition.
Nothing happens. But why? Igniters. As you can see here, that was the only igniter that had worked, but unfortunately it wasn't secured properly and it slipped over. The next igniters were made from different metal, which my not really powerful battery couldn't ignite. That attempt was failed and I had to go back and try once again soon.
Two, one, ignition.
Again. Why? Pretty much the same reason why it hadn't took off previously. I made some changes in the igniters and the battery, but once again it was not enough and the rocket hadn't took off. Again. Learning from these failed attempts, I decided to take a really close look at the ignition system, and after some tests I came up with the solution. Ignition system will consist of two 3.7 volt cells. The first one will serve as a relay control, and the second one will actually ignite the rocket from close distance. As I finished soldering it, I tried once again, the final attempt.
Three, two, one, ignition.
It's so nice to see that after so much time and work, the rocket finally took off. And the only part left is to check the altitude and... oh, that's when the bad part comes in. Rocket went very good, but the electronics, well, they didn't work. The only thing I got is 1 second of collected data and then it decided to stop working. I mean, it's really disappointing because making the electronics took much more time and effort than building this simple rocket, and it didn't work anyways. But I'll try to find the issue, fix the electronics, and then make the second launch in the future. But now I think that's a good moment to end. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing, and one last thing. This is my first video on this channel and I'm still learning a lot of things, so if you see a place for improvement, feel free to let me know in the comments. Stay tuned for the upcoming videos.